I'm the big LG Doc Gallows, and you're watching the Wrestling Junkies. Boom.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Wrestling Junkies Podcast. I'm Mr. Cincinnati. Podcast Dad is running a little bit behind, but he should be joining me later on in our broadcast. But nevertheless, we press on. So thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. As always, you can find us on X and TikTok at Junkies Pod. You can like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram at Wrestling Junkies Pod. But most importantly, please do us a huge favor and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers, and we need your help to get there. All that we ask is that you tell one person if you enjoy what we do here on our show. If you like the lack of tribalism, there is plenty of room at our table. So tell your friends, pull up a seat. We would love to have you. Also, if you could, show some love to our friends at the Main Event Wrestling Network at mainevent_net on all social media platforms. Quick reminder, this weekend, we have our 24-hour main event marathon starting 8 p.m. Friday night, going until 8 p.m. on Saturday night. You can catch the Wrestling Junkies Saturday morning, 8 to 10 a.m. We're going to break down a little bit of Saturday night's main event. We're going to talk Clash in Italy. We're going to talk Double or Nothing. And we might have a couple of special guests as well. So make sure that you tune in this Saturday morning, 8 a.m. for the Wrestling Junkies on the main event marathon. Also, this Thursday, we have Luke Menzies, formerly known as Ridge Holland, joining the Wrestling Junkies podcast. Super excited for this one. We're going to talk about life after WWE. He has an incredible tour of the UK coming up here in the summer and has some incredible opportunities ahead. So we're super excited to have this conversation. So again, this Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern, come hang out with us. It is going to be a fantastic conversation, and we would love to have you guys at our table. But now, it is time to dive into a side of pro wrestling that fans don't always get to hear about, at least from firsthand sources, the business side of the wrestling industry. And my guest tonight is somebody who has been incredibly well respected throughout pro wrestling for helping talent protect what makes them unique. So we're talking trademarks, gimmicks, ring names, branding, intellectual property. He's worked with wrestlers and creators across the industry to help them secure ownership of their identities in an era where branding matters more than ever. You may know him online as the Gimmick Attorney, and tonight I am excited to welcome Michael Dockins to the Wrestling Junkies podcast. Counselor, how are you tonight?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
The pleasure is all mine. I gotta say this is an absolute honor. Again, this is being a lawyer and being a bit of a nerd when it comes to this sort of stuff. I am super happy to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, I got to be honest. I'm people like to say all the time, "Oh, I'm blessed. I am blessed that I get to do the things I get to do and help as many wrestlers because I've loved wrestling since I was a kid. Growing up, yeah. I very distinctly remember for I don't know, 7th, 8th birthday, asking my dad, "Can I get WrestleMania 6? I got to see Hulk Hogan take on the Ultimate Warrior. Like I've got to get this. Can this please be a birthday present?" Because I think it was on March 31st, which is my birthday. Maybe it was April 1st, was the day after, but it was certainly on or around my birthday, and that was a birthday present. So, I mean, I go way back. It's been an honor.
Yeah, and I mean, especially in those times, because I also remember being the same way of, birthday comes around, it's okay, what do I want to get? Is it a figure? Is it a show that I want to see? Like, I definitely understand how that feeling is, and it's nice that, that spark is still there for you after all these years.
Yeah, it really is. And, another story, I don't think I've ever talked about this one before, but just talking about surreal things in your life, I remember there was a WCW pay-per-view and, the hotline. Call on the hotline and you might get a chance to talk to Sting. And, we're going to talk to Sting and blah, blah, blah. And I asked my mom, can I call the hotline? Like this, I know it costs money. It's, $2 the first minute, 99 cents each minute, whatever. Can I try this? And she was like, okay, yeah, give it a try. Well, I didn't realize, of course, that it was, if you dial it, it's $2, whether you're on the phone for a minute or not. Mm-hmm. And I dialed in, I don't know how many times, trying to get to the Sting portion of it and just racked up this like $120 phone bill or something, trying again, not realizing what it was. And she didn't punish me. She was upset, of course, but, valuable life lesson of how those things really work. Yeah. And, but come full circle, now I've done legal work for Sting, right? I've helped him with his trademarks and things. And I count him amongst friends. We just sometimes chit chat about things, not even work related.
Are your parents surprised, even in the slightest, that you were working with wrestlers full time now?
I would say initially that it was a little bit of a surprise, because it's like, well, wait a minute, how does a guy from Southern Indiana that lives in Ohio now do all this wrestling stuff? How did it start? And when I kind of go through the story of how it all started and came to be, they're like, well, that makes sense. But as far as could they have seen me doing it? Yeah, I think they could have. I mean, even when they didn't necessarily support it, my siblings were like, "Oh, wrestling, that's fake. It's so stupid. You're wasting your time." They are all so incredibly supportive and proud of the things that I've been able to do.
That's fantastic. So when did law and professional wrestling first intersect for you?
Yeah, so I was a practicing attorney for probably about 14 years, and had gone inside counsel and was a patent counsel for a large solar company, and had primarily focused on patents and protecting people's inventions and things, and done work for big motor companies and solar companies and things like that, and always did some work in some trademark stuff, but it wasn't really the emphasis of my career. And I very distinctly remember in 2017, 18-ish, laying on my couch. I had gotten home from a workout and gotten cleaned up. The kids were in bed. The wife was taking a shower, and I'm fast forwarding through 3 hours of Raw, because who's got time to watch 3 hours of Raw? And I'm skipping around and whatever. And I remember as I was working out, listening to some podcasts, and I remember listening to it was a Conrad Thompson podcast, and the Starcast was coming up and how successful it was. And I couldn't go to the first Starcast. I wanted to, but had family obligations and couldn't make it to Chicago. And so I'm laying there thinking, man, I see so many stories. I hear so much stuff about the guys that I grew up watching, the Jake the Snake Roberts and Greg Valentine's, that era, that get outside of the WWF bubble and can't use their name or have to change their name. And even current talent, in the 17, 18 time, leave the company and they have to rebrand. I just don't feel like these folks know what they don't know. Yeah. And who better to help them than me, an IP attorney, but somebody that's a wrestling fan. Like, if they want to talk about Dynamite Kid and Tiger Mask, let's go. You want to talk about some Eddie Guerrero stuff? I'm fine with it. You want to talk about Macho Man and Steamboat? Okay. Like, I can talk the classic stuff with them, but also talk current product. And so I thought, well, how do I do this? How do I break in? And so that night, first thing I did is I sent a DM to Conrad. I was like, hey, you don't know me. We're not friends. We've never met. We're at the same age. We watch the same stuff. I love what you love, and I listen to your podcasts. And here's what I do. And you need to protect your brand. Maybe you've thought about it, maybe you haven't, but the Starcast, whatever, like, you should consider this. And all the podcasts, you should consider protecting the name of your podcast. And here's the reasons why. And if you want to hire me, great. If you don't, that's okay too. I'm just a fan of the show, and you should ask me questions. I'm not on the meter, right? If you've got a guy in Alabama or somewhere else that you're using, great, keep using them because you know them and you trust them. But if you think that maybe you're being fed a line or the bills are too high or whatever, bounce it off me. I'm a friendly voice and whatever. Thinking I'm never going to get a response to this.
Yeah,
and I'm not kidding when I say, like, 30 seconds later, I have a DM back from him. And he says, man, your timing is interesting because I just reached out to a guy here in Alabama this week. I'd be interested on your thoughts. I said, send me an email and I will give you a proposal. Tomorrow morning, I'll have a proposal in your inbox about what I think you could protect, should protect, how you should protect it, give you some options. Sends me his email the next morning. I got up early, went into the office, put together a proposal of all the different podcasts and the kind of classes and goods and services and things that they could protect. And it was never about being a money grab. So I was like, look, that'd be expensive to do all that. I don't know that I would do that. If it were me and my money, this is probably what I'd protect. And so let's have further conversations. And he replied back, thanks. I'll look at this and consider I'll be back in touch. Took a while. I had to send him emails every now and again. I'm like, hey, I'm going to be the squeaky wheel until you tell me to stop pestering you. And that's fine to tell me to stop pestering you, but I'm going to keep sending it because I know how this goes. It just gets buried in your inbox. And you'll circle around to it when you can. He goes, that's exactly what happens. Yes, please do that. And so a few months went by, and then one day my phone rings, and it's him. And on the phone with him was Arn Anderson. And he was like, hey, he needs some help with something. And then he called me a week later and was like, hey, we're doing Starcast in Vegas, and I've booked The Undertaker and Kurt Angle, and we want to do this stuff and we make a splash online. And I think some trademark filings might do that. Can we do this? Can we do this today? Absolutely. So I dropped everything I was doing and handled it that day. And then he just started introducing me to people. And, it's a very word of mouth business. And so once you do work for people and you do good work and they know they can trust you, they tell their friends, and their friends tell their friends, and their friends tell their friends. And that's just kind of how it took off from there. And, so I went from having zero wrestling business and zero clients in wrestling to I've now helped somewhere around 250, 260 different professional wrestlers with legal work, mostly IP, but certainly it's branched out well beyond IP as well.
Yeah, and I remember, some of the first times I did hear your name on Conrad podcasts and kind of at crossroads of my career of kind of what do I want to do and what does this look like for me, at that point in my career, only 3 or 4 years in at that point, I think. And to have learned that you were also in Ohio and not a not a New York or an LA or Miami or Chicago, it was just I just remember Flabbers being gasted that there is an avenue to do this in mid-market cities, so to speak.
Yeah. It really was more about knowing the right people and getting the right introduction than it was where I was. And we're a AmLaw 200 firm. We're a Shoemaker, Loop, and Kendrick. We're pretty big. We're in 7 or 8, 9 cities. But the pitch that we have, when it's true, is look, you can hire those firms and you may or may not be getting good service or great service. I don't know. It's going to depend on the lawyer and depend on the firm. But what you're definitely going to get is New York rates or Chicago rates or LA rates. Boy, wouldn't it be better to have Midwest rates and get the same quality of service? Just give us a try. And I think you'll see you get the same quality, if not better quality of work, and you're going to get it for less expensive. But yeah, I mean, that's the legal game, right? Whenever I was in law school, I was looking at transferring. I went to the University of Toledo for law school. Not from Ohio. I'm originally from Indiana. And the reason I went to the University of Toledo was because they gave me a full ride and I didn't want any debt. And so I could have gone to different law schools, arguably better law schools, certainly higher ranked law schools, but I was going to take on some debt and it just wasn't worth it to me. But I did look at transferring after my first year. And a professor that I ended up being a research assistant for and a teacher's assistant for, I asked her to write me a letter of recommendation, and she did. And then she said, you should really consider whether or not you want to do this because, you're on law review and all of that. And, I think you'll find, and I think you ask anybody that is being honest, the top 10% of any law class of any law school from Ivy League down is fungible. Yeah. You could take any of the top 10% out of any school and drop them into another one, and they're going to be top 10% there. Yeah. So where you went to law school really matters for your first job. Yeah. But after your first job, it just doesn't matter. Nobody cares. It's about reputation at that point and about the quality of your work. And so, leave if you want to, if that's right for you and your life and your goals, then, go with God. I'm happy to write this recommendation for you, but, really think about it. And I did, and I stayed. I mean, it was a great advice and it turned out to be true.
That's fantastic. And I know, I promise we are going to talk about some wrestling to everybody that's watching here. But like I said, I had to get my my legal nerd moment out of the way there. But let's dive in. I mean, when it comes to your particular practice, intellectual property, in professional wrestling, what are some of the biggest misconceptions that wrestlers may have when it comes to ownership of their gimmick or their ring name?
Yeah, I think it's a misconception, not just amongst wrestlers, but really the public in general. People will hear the word trademark or they'll hear the word copyright or hear the word patent, and they'll use them interchangeably. And they're very, very, very different things, right? And so that's one thing. They'll be like, oh, I need to copyright something. And I'll always ask, well, do you really mean copyright? Like, did you write a book or a story? Did you take a photograph? Did you make a sculpture? Because that's copyright. Copyright is the expression of an idea. Or do you mean your brand, your name, your gimmick, or whatever? Oh, I meant trademark. So just identifying the right type of intellectual property is a common misconception or misunderstanding that people have, again, inside and outside of wrestling. But the biggest one, a big one, is that rights in a trademark come from use. It comes from using the trademark. It doesn't come from registration. It doesn't come from some piece of paper somewhere filing something. If you use a trademark, you have rights in that trademark from the date you first started using it. So some people think, well, I don't have a registration, so I don't own it. No, you own it. You own it by virtue of using it. But what you have is a common law trademark. So you have a trademark and you have rights and you can sue or be sued or wherever wherever you have used it. So if you're a wrestler and you just wrestle exclusively in the Northeast, that's where your rights are. So you're going to have New York, Pennsylvania, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, that sort of stuff. But you're not going to have it in Florida or somewhere else. And so let's say somebody, some guy comes up, he's doing a kind of territory tour, and he wrestles in the Northeast, loves your gimmick, loves the name. He goes back out west. Hell, goes to the Midwest, goes to Indiana and Illinois and Kentucky. He could use the same name, and you can't really stop him because you don't have any rights there. Yeah. Well, let's say that guy goes and does something just awful. I make something up, but does something awful, beats a guy senseless, attacks him and puts him in the hospital for real. And using that name, and it makes the news. Wrestler, Mr. Cincinnati, he beat up so-and-so and did all this. And you all of a sudden get the bad will associated with that. Your name gets dragged through the mud through no fault of your own, but you can't stop him because you had no rights there. You haven't used there. That's the benefit of a federal registration, amongst many others. But that, if nothing else, is the benefit is it gives you nationwide coverage, gives you nationwide rights. Yeah. And so the understanding about first use versus registration is a very common thing. Well, I had this name before I went to WWE, and now WWE owns it. What do I do? Well, WWE doesn't own it. You probably, we see this a lot. You probably signed a contract, not really fully understanding what everything was and what it all said. But they do have language in there that says you own it. That's wrestler IP. If you fill it out, if you manage putting that in as part of the contract. But they reserve the right to file and register your trademarks, your IP in their own name while you're employed by them. So that happens all the time. People, if they're going to keep somebody's gimmick and keep their name, they'll go off and file a bunch of applications and get registrations for their name, but it'll be in the name of World Wrestling Entertainment. And then you have to go back to them later and say, hey, that was actually mine. Give it back. You either need to abandon it or you need to assign it to me. And that can be difficult, and people get frustrated with it sometimes. Now, I'm pleased to report that I've gotten a number of people's names back from WWE for them. But that's the biggest misconception. It's based on use, not based on registration.
Okay. I also want to give the chats here. The podcast dad is on dad duty right now, but he said he needs the story about Danhausen. I think Danhausen's one of the first to trademark his face paint, if I'm not mistaken. So tell us how that initial conversation goes, again, within what you can say without, breaching privilege, but just the story about this being so novel as far as face paint. I mean, we've seen tons of wrestlers over the years, but Danhausen was the first to break this history.
He was. So Don got introduced to me again, word of mouth business, right? Through a friend of a friend, guy in our wrestling group chat. And he's like, hey, I know this indie guy and he's great. He's hilarious. Like, I think he's really going to take off. He's just super entertaining and he's super over with the fans, but he's just kind of an indie guy. Do you mind talking to him? No, of course not. Like, it's always free to talk. We can try to figure something out and see if I can help him. So Donovan and I got on a call and I said, hey, I'm familiar with your work. Haven't seen a lot of it, but I dig what you're doing. And it seems to be going really well. Yeah, it is. He said, I feel like this is really going to take off. And subsequently, after we had our conversations, he signed with Ring of Honor, then went from Ring of Honor to AEW, and then obviously now he's with WWE. But it was that early where he was an independent guy, just kind of making the territories and getting known. But he said, what can I protect? My legal name is Donovan Danhausen, and my wrestling name is Danhausen. Can I register my legal name? I said, absolutely, you can. Really? Can I? I said, well, you might remember, or maybe not, depends how far in the bubble you are. But Stephanie McMahon did a big interview, and she caught all kinds of online strays saying, we control your name. We own your name. Yeah. And people were like, what do you mean? It's a legal name. They can't control somebody's legal name. Like, I have to rename myself because I left WWE. And that's obviously not the case. You're always free to use your legal name. I'm always free to introduce myself. Hey, I'm Michael Dockins. Nice to meet you. What they were saying and what she stated maybe ineloquently was they can control contractually. And this isn't a WWE thing. This is an all wrestling companies thing. Yeah. They can control the use of your legal name in commercial ways. So if you're commercializing your legal name, you're selling a product, endorsing a product, doing something commercially, they can stop that because they have a right to your name, image, and likeness essentially while you're under contract with them. So all the time, if you looked up in the trademark office, Taylor Swift, she's probably got 70 or 80 different Taylor Swift trademark registrations. Mike Tyson has trademark registrations. Legal names can absolutely be registered. So I'm like, yeah, of course, that's an easy one. That's a slam dunk. There's not going to be a conflict there. We'll search it first, but there's not going to be. I'd be shocked if there's another Danhausen registration out there, let alone one for wrestling. He said, well, I've got these catchphrases. Can you do catchphrases? Of course. So, very nice, very evil, and love that Danhausen and just different things he was doing. So yeah, catchphrases, easy. You do that too. So if you've got a particular logo that you use all the time, let's consider a logo. Thing with logos is they change. People want to refresh them. That's okay. You can still register it and, decide to refresh it after 5, 6, 8, 10 years. But you're going to refresh it at some point, and that registration is not going to be good anymore because you're not going to be able to prove use. You're going to have stopped using it, and rights come from use. Yeah. So he's like, yeah, I don't really have a logo that I necessarily use all the time. I tweak it all the time, new t-shirts all the time. That's the idea, is to have new merch, new stuff to sell. So yeah, logo's off the board. And he asked me, he said, what about my face paint? So that's an interesting question. It is, I will say unequivocally, without pause or hesitation, your face paint is a trademark. There is no doubt about it. That should be something that can be registered as a trademark, because you don't want somebody else, even if they have a different build from you, but if particularly if they have the same build from you, thinking that they're getting Danhausen, they're getting you, and they get somebody else. And a trademark at its core is a source identifier. So the source of the wrestling, the source of the entertainment is Donovan, not some knockoff. So I don't know that it's ever been done. I'll look into it, but I think we can. He said, well, there was this Magic the Gathering card that I saw, and fans tagged me in a bunch of stuff online, and it looked really close to my makeup. He's like, look, I'm not saying they stole it from me. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but it was very similar, and it just struck me as, well, that doesn't seem right. Can other people start doing it?
Yeah.
So he goes, well, what's the downside? I said, well, the downside is we spend some time, we spend some money, and we don't get a registration. It doesn't make it any less of a trademark. You just don't have a federal registration. I said, well, what's the upside? So the upside is we get it. And I think there are great arguments. Like I fully expect we're going to get rejected, because I think it's going to be a matter of first impression. But we just deal with the rejections. So it's going to cost a little more to get it. But when we get it, you'll have done something that nobody else has done. And he was like, well, let's do it. Okay. So went down the path and searched, looked through all the face paint that I could think of, and different guys and different entities and different wrestling companies, whoever. Never found anybody that had ever done it. WWE had certainly gotten some registrations for, it was a logo, but it was the logo, kind of the Ultimate Warrior's face paint, upside down W looking face paint. But they didn't do it as a face paint. It was, like I said, a logo. So he'd wear it on his trunks, or it would be on his different merch. It would be on his Jumbotron or Titantron entrance and things like that, but never kind of a face paint thing. It was just a logo that happened to mimic his paint. And I thought, boy, who else has done this? What other world outside of wrestling would have done this? Kiss, of course. Yeah. Gene Simmons, Ace Frehley, Paul Stanley. Who am I leaving out? Somebody. Peter Criss? Did I say Peter Criss? They have done it. I mean, Gene Simmons is a trademark god/monster. So went and looked, and it was either 79 or 81. They registered their face paint, each individually. And the drawing, for them, it wasn't a drawing at all. It was actual photos of them. They reproduced poorly because it was a copy machine in the 70s. But they had done it. And I thought, well, who else? That's all kind of the same person, even though it's 4 separate. And I thought, I wonder if McDonald's ever did anything for Ronald McDonald. And sure enough, McDonald's had done it for Ronald McDonald. Okay. So when we filed the Danhausen face paint, we did it as a drawing, did it as a drawing of him in his face paint, disclaiming things that we weren't saying were part of the trademark. And when we got the rejection, they said, well, this isn't a trademark. And to the extent that it is, your drawing doesn't match your specimens, because you're giving me a photo of a real person in a wrestling ring. You've given me images of T-shirts and things like that. And that's when I politely and respectfully told them how wrong they were. And while this was a matter of first impression in wrestling, it's not a matter of first impression for the trademark office. So pointed out the different KISS registrations and all the things that since the late 70s, early 80s, KISS had filed when they were renewing their registrations, that were photos of real people with face paint, photos of T-shirts that had the face paint on it. Same thing with McDonald's. And I was expecting we might have a couple back and forth. I might have to appeal this to the examining attorney's bosses. And I'm happy to report, after one back and forth, they agreed with me and they registered it. And so Danhausen got the first ever face paint registration in wrestling.
And the world was quite literally never the same, especially with what you see him doing now, on TV every week. I mean, he took that chance on himself. And now, I mean, a highest earning merch seller. He's had maybe 3 or 4 matches in the 2 months that he's been there. I mean, it's huge upswing for him, huge upswing for the company as well. So I mean, it's there's obviously, again, great benefit to protecting your IP and making sure that you're looking after yourself when no one else is. You are the CEO of your brand, of your, you are the brand. Without naming any names, what are some of the common mistakes that talent may make when it comes to building a brand within this industry?
Not clearing it first. It's a small but important thing to do. Again, not just wrestling, all companies. What happens oftentimes is people fall in love with the trademark. They fall in love with a brand or a slogan or a logo, and they don't know if somebody else is actually using it. Mm-hmm. For trademark world, to get into a little legal nerd stuff, trademark infringement is a balance. It's a lot of things, but in its simplest form, it's a comparison of the trademarks, and it's a comparison of the goods or services that represent the trademarks. So you can have the exact same trademark. This is a bad example because Nike is considered a famous trademark, which gets a different kind of class of protection. Yeah. But let's just say Nike for shoes, and then Nike for pots and pans. Well, nobody thinks a shoe company makes pots and pans, and nobody thinks a pots and pans company makes shoes. That's not infringement, even though the trademarks are identical. Lots of people have the same brands. Lots of people have the same trademarks, and they coexist just fine because there's no likelihood of confusion.
Sure.
Similarly, you can sell the exact same goods and have different names: Nike and Reebok, Nike and Adidas, Adidas and whatever, and one. Any of these shoe brand companies, you can do that. So it's a balance. It's a comparison. And then there's kind of sub factors that you consider. But the first thing that people should do is look, hey, can I actually use this? And am I okay to use it because I'm only looking at federal registrations, or did I look at common law uses as well? A full and extensive trademark clearance search is going to look at your federal registrations and federal applications. It's going to look at each state has their own trademark database. The state trademark registrations are barely worth the paper they're printed on, but nevertheless, it's a database. It's a valuable database that helps us search and maybe find some stuff. But then common law, just going out and splashing around and see what you can find that hasn't been registered that could be a problem later. For example, the Yeet trademark, it was registered by a wrestler in, I think it was North Carolina. Certainly somewhere on the East Coast. And then, is it Jay or Jimmy? It's Jay. Jimmy, Jimmy. Jimmy adopted it and started using it. And that, as I understand, I don't know this firsthand, but as I understand, WWE might have gotten a cease and desist about it.
Yeah.
And rightfully so, because this guy in wherever it was on the East Coast had it. And I'm led to believe because they're using it, WWE probably bought it, or at least paid a license fee, or somehow got the right to use it. But he probably never would have guessed just using Yeet as a tagline, a catchphrase, or whatever you want to call it as a trademark was going to be a problem. Nobody surely in wrestling has done it, except somebody in wrestling had done it. And so clearing things first before adopting it, before falling in love with it, making sure, hey, I can use this, I can own it, is probably the most important thing and a thing that people get caught up in the most.
Yeah, that's incredibly well said, and like you said, it's those little things that we may not necessarily think of, because pro wrestling, yes, it is an entertainment form, and but it's unlike really any other when it comes to a lot of different things. But the nuts and bolts of intellectual property law, they're relatively standard, I would say, across different entertainment mediums. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. I want to talk to you a little bit about WWE and their ID program, their NIL. Just definitely want to get some of your insight on that. Here we are seeing these programs to develop talent and kind of streamline how WWE, creates that pipeline from, Evolve to WrestleMania one day, hopefully. If you can, what can you tell us about, anything IP related when it comes to signing athletes, collegiate athletes to the NIL program, and then independent wrestlers, and that relationship as far as independent contractor when it comes to WWE ID?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little cynical about WWE ID. I think from a 10,000 foot level, it seems like a very good and altruistic sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But I think how it's worked out in practice, and I think you've seen people come out on the other side of it that would agree to this, is it's WWE's way of kind of putting their hooks in people. Keep an eye on them. Maybe this is going to work out. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's somebody we want. But it doesn't really cost them much to do it. And they put a lot of strings on it that lets them kind of keep a stranglehold and keep some exclusivity. So it doesn't really they're not really giving up much, and they get a lot back. And as far as the potential of somebody that they think could be a star. And, some of these people have fallen off because they said, okay, we had them under the ID program for a while, and we don't see it in them. So we'll just let them go from here. So I don't necessarily like it for that reason. It seems to be taking advantage of people who are like, oh my gosh, it's WWE. Of course, I'll sign whatever the heck you want. It gives me an in. It gives me an advantage or whatever. I don't know that it does. It just kind of puts you in a holding pattern, beholden to them to an extent. But those contracts, they're not altogether different from any NIL contracts for amateur athletes, and it's not all that different from an NXT contract. It's not all that different from any other contract where, the policy is, and this is a non-negotiable thing. If they create the ID, the brand, the trademark, if they create it, they own it. If you create it while you work for them, they own it. They own it all. Yeah. And so really the only thing you own is whatever it is you might have had before you went there. For the most part, people who have a brand before they go there get rebranded. And that's because they want to own it. They don't want the other person to own it. Now, if you're AJ Styles or, somebody who has a huge brand and huge following, they would look ridiculous to rebrand somebody like that. So of course, AJ Styles has to come in as AJ Styles. But absent that, where you're kind of you're already well established and at an upper level in wrestling, you're going to get rebranded and they're going to own the name.
One that always was always fascinating to me, or at least made me think a little bit, is right at the inception of AEW, Cody Rhodes is going simply by Cody, and then when you see him with Brandy, that's when they can say Cody and Brandy Rhodes. So if you can, or if you know anything about it, what was the issue there as to why it took so long for him to be able to use Cody Rhodes after leaving WWE?
Yeah, that's when I got to tiptoe around a little bit because I wasn't involved with that. But he did not own the trademark or the registration for Cody Rhodes.
Gotcha.
He does now. So that was why at the time he did not, he came out. I wasn't at that show, but in kind of the dark portion of the show, when the show had ended, he came out and was in the ring and got on the mic. And one of my buddies was there and he recorded the whole thing and sent it to me. And he was like, hey, I'm proud to be able to say, as of today, it's official. I'm Cody Rhodes again. And it was just a super cool moment for me to see it. I'm sure I've got it saved on my phone somewhere. But he had wrestled in high school. I think that's really well known. And I think it was maybe his last match or last tournament or sometime during his senior year, he actually came out and wrestled as Cody Rhodes as an amateur.
Oh, okay.
And his dad, Dusty, had a promotion, Turnbuckle Championship Wrestling, and he was a referee for some matches. I think probably while he was still an amateur. I don't remember the timing of it exactly, but I remember I was mowing my yard. I'm riding around, I'm mowing, and I get a text from one of my buddies in a group chat. And he goes, "Hey man, I just found this in my stuff, and I thought this was really cool. It's an old Turnbuckle program from the early 2000s. I was like, that's cool. He goes, check out this. And he sends me a photo of the page. And it's, this match, this person against this person with the referee, the Stardust Kid, Cody Rhodes. And I'm like, really? So he had done some work for a wrestling promotion before he ever signed with WWE or anywhere else. That's interesting. That's first use. And the rest of this day is history. But it was just friends that were like, this is cool. This is interesting. I said, mail that to me immediately. Like, if you want me to buy it from you, I'll buy it from you. Like, no, of course I'll send it to you. And mailed it to me. And so, things worked out as they should.
That's fantastic.
Rhodes people should own the Rhodes name. Dustin owns his name. Brandy owns her name. Cody owns his name. And Cody owns Dusty Rhodes as well.
Oh, okay. Very cool. Very cool. We'll keep it away from wrestling for now. I know that we may be getting into things you might have to tiptoe around, but I want to talk a little bit more about wrestling media and podcasts these days. I mean, that's kind of how you got your start working with Conrad, and seeing that wrestling media and podcasts are growing at an exponential clip these days. It seems like are content creators and podcasts facing some of the same branding concerns that wrestlers may face as well? Yeah,
the exact same concerns. All the time I'll have people say, I'm going to start a podcast. can I name it this? Can you
Yeah.
register it? And I'll say, let's clear it first. Give
Yeah.
me a minute. There have been a lot of podcasts, and a lot of podcasts, unfortunately, that fail. If anybody with a computer and a microphone can start a podcast, and sometimes that's what happens. And so there have been a ton of times where I've come across some podcasts that are out there, and they might have 30 subscribers, but they're using it, and they're on Apple and those places. They don't care. They'll put 15 podcasts by the same name up there.
Yeah.
And if somebody wants to complain, they can. And Apple has their IP infringement procedures. But I'm like, that's not. You don't want similar, like I said, somebody using the same name and hurting somebody. You don't want somebody to go in there and go off half-cocked and say a bunch of defamatory things, or just vitriolic, racist or misogynistic or homophobic or whatever. And then all of a sudden it makes the news because they said something or something came of it. Oh, the this, that, and the other podcast had this host who said this and all whatever. You get the bad will. You get the stick on you. You don't want that. So maybe you can coexist and have the same name as them, even though they have superior rights. But do you want that? Instead, you should own a brand that is different enough that you can own it, have broader rights, stronger rights, so that you can be the one who's stopping people from doing things. So very similar.
And this kind of goes along the same lines about betting on yourself in pro wrestling. If somebody out there is watching right now that may not have taken the steps to speak to a Michael Dockins or anybody else with ESQ after their name about these particular issues, if they're kind of new to this and feeling like they're drinking out of a fire hose right now, what are 2 or 3 things that you would say to them about this process, or what can you recommend that would make it a little bit less stressful as you're kind of easing into it?
Yeah, there's an old joke or saying or whatever you want to call it. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Yeah.
Right. And what happens with people is they get some paralysis because it just seems overwhelming and there's too much stuff to do. And so taking things one bite at a time is the best thing you can do. So, if it were me and I'm starting a business or starting a podcast, or, podcast is a business, I would want to lay out a roadmap, right? I'd want to know, and I lovingly chide people all the time, clients all the time, every day about, hey man, what are you doing? Your first call should have been to me, your IP attorney. I know that sounds silly, but you have fallen in love with a name and a brand you can't use. And now you're telling me you're not going to change it. And that's fine. You don't have to. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm just telling you what could happen. You might get sued, and then you are paying damages or an attorney to get you out of it. And you're going to have to rebrand anyway. So, I always tell people, really, one of the first questions you should answer, one of the first things you should figure out is, what am I going to call this thing? And make sure you can call it that thing.
Yeah.
From there, then thinking about what are the next steps, formation, right? So a lot of wrestlers, certainly not all of them, I'm trying to do my best to educate as many of them as possible for a multitude of reasons why they should run everything through an LLC. They should form an LLC. They should have their contracts through the LLC. They should get an LLC bank account and checking account. And it will make their taxes infinitely easier, because you're going to have Mike Dockins credit card here, and then the Gimmick Attorney LLC, that doesn't exist. I work for a law firm, so I don't need that. But a Gimmick Attorney LLC checking account and debit card or credit card there. Anything that's business related that's a tax write-off, I'm going to put on the Gimmick Attorney credit card.
Yeah.
And everything that's me personally buying something for my kids or my wife or whatever that's not related to my business, I'm going to use my personal. So at the end of the year, I can take 12 months worth of statements and give them to my attorney or CPA, my accountant, and say, hey, everything that's money in is income. Everything that's money out is a business expense. So your tanning, your gym, your podcast, your equipment, your promotions, your sponsorships, anything that you're doing to get your name out there, that's all a business expense. Makes your taxes a heck of a lot easier and easier to track what you're doing, because now you're not commingling funds. But the liability side of it is just as important, right? LLC is limited liability company. So God forbid you dump somebody on their head and break their neck. What's going to happen is that person's going to sue you. They're going to sue the maker of the ring. They're going to sue the venue. They're going to sue the company. They're going to sue the owner of the company. They're going to sue anybody and everybody that's anywhere even remotely interested or adjacent to the accident. Yeah. And, a lot of those people shouldn't be named, and they get out of it pretty easily. You still got to hire an attorney to get out of it. Yeah. But, you're going to go through all of that. So what you want is for the assets of the LLC to be at risk, not the assets of you personally, not your house, your
Sure.
car, your collectibles, your whatever. And so that's kind of step two. Figure out what you're going to call yourself, make sure you can actually, do that, and then form an entity that is going to own everything and then through which you're going to run everything. When it comes to businesses, not necessarily wrestlers, but businesses, podcasts, for example, you've got a co-host. I tell people all the time, I probably say it on a daily basis. Yeah, you need to have some sort of writing between the two of you. If it's going to be a partnership, then it's a partnership agreement. If it's an LLC, it's going to be your articles of organization. It's going to be whatever form it is. There's going to be paperwork, because boy, it's a heck of a lot easier to figure out that paperwork and get it put into place when you're friends than when and if something bad happens and you're enemies. And you're left holding the bag and trying to figure out who owns what, and you're just arguing into a vortex about what's happening, because then you have the playbook in front of you. You've got the agreement. It seems unnecessary. This is my best friend. Nothing's ever going to happen. Like, okay, I mean, I hear you. However, it makes it even easier if you've got paperwork.
Yeah, it's easier to plan for the divorce while everybody's still happy. That's I've explained it to clients that way. And podcast that has even said, I don't know about you, but I feel smarter. This is, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, we talk to just about everybody that does everybody in the industry, regardless of its ring crew, wrestlers, referees, you name it. I think these are always the conversations that I look forward to the most, because it's such an important side of the industry that not everybody either wants to understand, or they just don't have an interest in it, or think that it's never going to apply to them. But I mean, when we see everything that goes on, and especially over the last let's just say 5 to 10 years, there's been that increase in hearing about protection of certain IP. And again, that's obviously because of the impact that you had on Conrad and kind of spreading it like a wildfire there.
Yeah, it's everybody in this social media sort of world is starting to understand I'm a brand. I have a brand. Even if you're not a professional wrestler, I mean, I can only guess. I looked at it a while back, but Mr. Beast has just a pile of trademarks and registrations and things. It's his brand. That's what he's got.
Yeah.
I remember coming up in law school, my trademark professors telling us, he goes, if you took the world and you had it in your hand and you shook everything off the world, Coca-Cola would still have 98% of its value, because its value isn't in its buildings. It's not in its bottles and machines and whatever. Its value is in its trademarks and in its intellectual property. And it's trade secret, really. It's formulation. But that is where all of its value is. And I think you probably hear more so in the last few years than ever before. WWE isn't a wrestling company. It's an entertainment company. It's an IP company. They have got so much content and so much IP that if I said to you, TKO just decided they're going to open a wing at Universal. It's going to be the WWE wing, and there's going to be an Undertaker horror house, and there's going to be a Hulk Hogan roller coaster, and there's going to be a Legion of Doom gaming, whatever. You'd be like, yeah, that makes total sense. I bet they will. And they're going to build a Hall of Fame. Like, none of that. That's all content. Just like there was an Angry Birds theme park made in Norway or wherever it was. That's all. It's all IP. They've got not only their own content that they've created, but all the stuff that they've acquired over the years. I mean, they've got tens of thousands of hours of content and IP that they own. And so they're really, truly at their core an IP company.
Yeah. And that can be hard for us to hear as wrestling fans sometimes, especially, the state of WWE as a whole in 2026. But, it's,
I agree.
Again, it's not changing anytime soon, but, it's important to adapt with the times. And, I mean, let's be honest, you've been kind of the pioneer of this, so it's pretty damn cool.
It is, and sometimes it'll hit me, and I think, man, this is crazy. Like I helped create something. Like, I don't want to give myself credit for that, but I kind of did. Yeah. And every now and again, I will sit back and just smile and be like, "This is cool. This is cool that I've helped create this thing and do this thing." It was born out of, I wanted to help people that have put their bodies on the line for my entertainment for decades, right? Like, I want to help people. If I can make it part of my job and, make a living off of it too, that's really cool.
Sure.
But at no point was it ever not something I want to educate. I want people to know. And I will tell, I've reached out to, I don't know how many wrestlers randomly and said, hey, I'm a trademark nerd and I looked and you filed an application for registration. You've done this thing. Good for you. You've taken the first step. Not everybody does that. But if you did it yourself or the attorney you used, because a lot of people will hold themselves out as trademark attorneys that aren't really. They just think, well, this isn't all that hard. I can do it. And they make mistakes.
Sure.
One of which is they'll file stuff and put people's addresses out there publicly.
Yeah.
And that is probably my number one pet peeve is when I see, a celebrity, somebody who's on TV weekly, who has a family, who has a wife and kids, like I have a wife and kids, whose public information, their address and things is out there publicly, and they can find it and be like, you need to go talk to your guy and tell him, hey, there's a way to hide this. If they need help, give them my number. I'll tell them how to do it. Happy to tell them how to do it, but I take privacy and personal privacy very seriously.
Sure.
And sometimes it has turned into, well, will you just do it? Will you take it over? And other times, like, I'll tell my guy, thanks for letting me know.
Yeah.
And again, education. I'm happy to.
Sure.
You should have, while you're out there throwing your body around for my entertainment, you should at least be able to go home and have some peace and quiet and not have people showing up at your door or sending you fan mail that you don't necessarily want.
All just sage sound advice. Like I said, I'm still a little bit mind blown that I'm getting to have this conversation with you, and I greatly appreciate you sitting down with me tonight. As we kind of wrap things up, are there any projects you have coming up? Anything you can tell us about that you're working on within the world of wrestling?
It's just a lot of the same. A couple years ago, the focus, I don't want to say the focus shifted, but I had more people approaching me about, hey, can you help me with my contract? Can you help negotiate this? And so I've taken on a lot more of that, and I'm willing to take on more of that. Again, people don't know what they don't know about some of these contracts. And boy, when I talk about sometimes people are just happy to be with the company, that happens all the time where they just will sign anything that's put in front of them. They're so excited that WWE gave an offer. And when I've reviewed contracts or negotiated contracts with people, I'm like, look, I'm going to tell you what it says. I'm not going to tell you what to do. That's your choice. I'm going to tell you the upside. I'm going to tell you the downside. I'm going to tell you the risk. And some of that risk you're going to be willing to accept. And I get that. And I'm not going to talk you out of it. So long as you understand what the implications are, then you should sign it. And if you're willing to take on more risk or take on less ownership or take on, whatever, be out of control of things because it is your dream to be in that ring, go with God. Do it. Have fun. But I just need you to understand what this means and what kind of control you're giving up. And I also tell people all the time, I'm in between, WWE and AEW, the big two. What are my options? And I tell them there's pluses and minuses with both companies. There's great things about each one, and there's not so great things about each one. You have to decide what's most important to you. And if it's most important, it's my dream to be on the mountaintop, which is to wrestle on a Raw. Have fun. But here's what's going to happen when you sign with them versus if you sign with AEW. Yeah.
Like that.
So that's more of that. That's what I've been doing a lot of and hope to do more of it. In addition to the trademark stuff, that's just kind of the bread and butter stuff. And I just get random texts or tweets or whatever all the time from people that shocks me sometimes. And it's been great.
That's awesome. That's awesome. If anybody does want to keep up with the adventures in IP world, where can everybody find you on social media?
On X or on Instagram, it's at Gimmick Attorney. If you go to gimmicattorney.com, it'll take you right to my firm bio and website, and all that'll have my email address and numbers. And I'm happy to field questions and help if I can.
Fantastic. Well, this has been truly a pleasure, Mike. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. Hopefully this is not the last time that we have you back on the show, because there's always something to talk about in law. There's always something to talk about in wrestling, and you never know when shit's going to go down. So it's always one of those things that, we're just along for the ride, and hope that you join us.
Yeah, I'm happy to be back, and thanks for having me.
Of course. That is going to do it for us tonight, everybody. Thank you so much again to the Gimmick Attorney, Mike Dockins, for joining me. Thank you to everybody watching at home. We will be back tomorrow. I promise Podcast Dad will be here. We're going to break down NXT, preview a little bit of AEW Dynamite. And again, this Thursday, Luke Menzies joins the Wrestling Junkies, doing one of his first interviews since leaving WWE. He's been on the interview circuit right now and has an incredible UK tour coming up and a lot of cool projects in the works. So Again, this Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern. But that is going to do it for us. Mike, stick around for just a second as we sign off here. But thank you guys so much for joining us. We appreciate you. We'll be back tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern, for the Gimmick Attorney, Mike Dockins. I am Mr. Cincinnati. This has been the Wrestling Junkies Podcast. And until tomorrow, enjoy those grabs, guys.